have the communication section from the last go-round, and I'm not really finding a robust discussion of internal communication here.
Which I'm okay. I'm not surprised.
Okay. I guess that's.
But I guess what I'm suggesting is there needs to be.
Yeah.
It needed to be further scoped out.
That's what I'm saying is I don't think we need to say, like, let's just cut and paste it from the previous, is because I don't really think what you want is here.
Include a communications section addressing internal communications, including DOI and BLM coordination and consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, there really needs to be a really great internal communication.
Yeah, I don't think it's in.
And it's not in place. Even despite good efforts, it's not in place. There's room for improvement. But back on public outreach, we had maybe an additional, Janet had talked about perhaps putting in an additional action item for looking at videos, but then there was a suggestion on Objective 3, Action 2, and we say host an annual or periodic media and public tour of wild horses in all phases of wild horse and burro management. So it's not just the long-term pastures, it would be for gathers.
So
does
amend
that fit with
action
you,
2 to
what you
include
had, Jan?
gathers?
No, wait, that was Objective 2, Action 3.
Yes.
Objective 2.
Objective.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wrote it wrong.
Objective 2, Action 3.
Thank you, Renee. Update website information on a regular basis,
Right.
And then
including.
delete in long-term pastures and insert all phases of BLM holding.
Management, well.
Handling and management or something
Handling,
like that.
right.
Yeah.
Were there any other issues on the public outreach that we wanted to highlight?
On Objective 3, Action 2, you had added at the end, and eco-sanctuaries.
I didn't write that down, if I did.
Oh.
Okay.
What was that? Objective 3, Action 2?
Host an annual or periodic media and public tour of wild horses in long-term pastures. I didn't add anything on my piece of paper, but.
I don't know why I wrote it down, because I wouldn't have thought of that.
Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
I have a
At the end
question
of
for-
Action 2? Objective 3, Action 2, long-term pastures?
I think we're okay there.
Never mind.
Never mind.
And Gary has a question.
Are we asking to do a public tour on private lands?
That's what it says.
Is that going to encourage private facilities to come forward?
Well, my question is liability. Are we placing a liability on the private landowner
Well,
by encouraging
the other
them tours?
The other part of that question is that my understanding is that right now the contracts for long-term pasture facilities don't include public tours and
That's
public access,
So that leaves us with eco sanctuaries.
pretty much.
Maybe that's how
Will
we
be
got
the
there.
new, will be the new contracts. You know, the ones at least coming up.
Maybe that's
So
where you
they
got
should be held
That
to,
might
you know,
be.
to.
You were thinking way ahead.
Oh.
you know,
That surprised
Actually, that
myself.
should be held to a transparency
Surprises
standard
me.
also.
Well, but doesn't it also,
Not every one of those possible sanctuaries will be involved in ecotourism.
right, but one of the points that has been made in terms of transparency is that for those long-term holding pastures, even with the current contracts, there's concern about what's going on with the horses. And right now, the contracts don't allow for, or they don't require the long-term holding pastures to be open to the public. So maybe one of the actions is to examine the possibility of having long-term pastures be available, because it's gonna be
Publicly
illegal, it's
accessible.
gonna be a legal issue, and we're not gonna decide it.
No, so
But we can go so far as saying, you know, have,
examine public
have BLM.
accessibility of.
yeah, exactly.
So give that to
Examine
me,
pu-
examine possibility of having,
Opening
Public
long-term,
access
Of
to,
having access to long-term.
public access to long-term
the
care.
long-term holding pasture, long-term holding facilities. Because then the legal folks will have to deal with that.
Mhm.
and that's action, what number under what
I
objective?
guess it would be under objective 3, and,
Gonna be a
We'll make it
rewrite of-
action 4.
that's actually maybe a rewrite of action 2. Because action 2 says host an annual or periodic media and public tour of wild horses in long-term pastures. And we just said the contracts, one of the challenges is the RFPs, the contracts that the long-term holding facilities are under don't require the contractor to stay open or give access to the public.
Has
So-
that issue been looked at by your people before, Carla or Dean?
What we want to make sure is we can't just change the contract now because
no,
we've all
no,
signed it,
no,
but we
that's not
could,
what we're saying.
we could make changes to new contracts and people
And
could
amend
bid
it.
on that.
And there may be certain
I'm asking,
contractors
have you
that would
looked
be
at that?
willing to,
In years past, whether it would be reasonable to put that kind of a requirement in and decided it wouldn't, or has that issue been considered?
I guess the approach and the way this action item is stated is that we were hoping to gain the concurrence with several long-term holding contractors that exist today to host an annual tour. We think we can do that. Have we considered and analyzed the legalities and consequences of liability and all that to put this stipulation in? No.
Well, then
and
maybe,
Dean, I think that's probably doable on a case-by-case basis with contractors. I think some of them will allow that to happen, and some of them probably won't want the responsibility.
Right, but the
Well,
but the
in our
problem with
discussions with them,
allowing.
that's exactly right.
Right, but one of the challenges with having 10 long-term holding pastures and having 8 of them say it's okay, then the 2 that say it's not okay are the 2 that are going to be rightly or wrongly suspect. So it still doesn't get around, still doesn't address the transparency. I think if you put something in here that says addressing the possibility, then let your legal eagles deal with it. That might open the door to amend your contracts or your renewals, new contracts or the renewals, to make that a requirement. That maybe it's only one day a month, but at least it's, it's on the books. But I really think it's gonna be a legal issue.
do you want to change action item 2 by inserting a sentence at the beginning which says, examine the feasibility of providing public access to long-term pasture facilities, period, host an annual or periodic media event or public tours of these facilities when possible.
Isn't that, oh,
So basically, both sentences, your addition in the front and then the second section?
I think so.
I would make them 2 separate standalone. Do an action 2 and an action 3. Just add the one that we've been trying to wordsmith, please,
As action 2,
as action 2,
and then the host as action 3.
right.
Okay, got it.
That's laborious, but.
We got there.
Okay, anything else on public outreach? How do we,
There was the action item on adding video cameras on helicopters under objective 3.
That was in objective 2, action 3,
yes,
and we already did that.
and I thought we
Okay,
did that.
sorry.
But under public outreach, we heard a little bit about, when BLM asks for public input, and they receive it, then should BLM have a way to let the public know what that input was? We heard a little bit of discrepancy in numbers and what have you, and I don't know, I'm not taking sides one way or the other, but is there anything that we could put in the public outreach as a strategy to sort of, to aim for transparency in public comment?
In the public comment and response process?
Right. And that would be not only internally for the strategy, but I guess it would include other issues.
Would you
What
put
do you
that
think?
under objective 2?
Increase the availability of wild horse and burro program, yes. Under objective 2, Anna, please.
So it would be like a feedback loop that when the BLM asks for public input, that it is received, it is summarized, and it is published.
Compiled.
Yeah, compiled or, reported back out what we heard.
Would that be an outgrowth of that other public feedback loop thing that you worked on last year?
In terms of people going to the website and submitting their thoughts and
And
comments.
what BLM did with it? Would it be?
Yeah, and I don't know how robust that is, meaning I don't know whether they can run reports on it and say, okay, this is all the feedback that came to our website, and this is how it's, what the categories
might
are,
be a-
that kind of thing.
That might be a question for Sally. Can you enlighten
Yeah,
us?
how's that going?
Sure, our website capabilities don't allow us to be able to run the reports on the comments that come in. And so that's one of the shortfallings of the public comment form. And since we've been going out with the strategy, we have gotten, and with all the gathers, I mean, there have been so many comments that will come in, but it's hard to categorize them as to, I mean, like with an easy report. So I don't know how we would do that. We'll keep working with our folks who run the web to see if we can do something. But that's where we are.
Right,
Well,
and as it relates to this strategy, if you think about the timing of, the public only having a couple of more weeks to comment on the strategy, and BLM is getting ready to go and present this to Congress, but will you have enough time to summarize the public comments that are made here and that come forth electronically before you go to Congress, or before you finalize the strategy and go to Congress? Are you going to have enough time to do that?
I think what I said this morning was we want to do that, and if we potentially have to delay when the report gets to Congress, it might be better to have completed the public review before we say we've completed our analysis of public comments. Yeah, I think we intend to understand the public comments before we finalize the strategy.
Well, then it might be helpful for the board to make a recommendation to do just that.
Okay.
And it may not come under public outreach, it may be one of those
Separate.
general
Right.
separate ones that, before, we recommend the secretary to incorporate all public comments, or review all public comments prior to, finalizing the strategy and taking it before Congress, something to that effect. Because then that ensures that, the public comments that are coming in between, today and March 30th will have a fair shake. Might give you
Almost
might give you
seems
some more wiggle room time too.
That almost seems like that should go without us having to say it.
One would
Right.
But we should say it. Okay. Anything
Okay.
else under public outreach?
I'm not sure I got this last one. I had,
About the
I
feedback
like
loop?
objective, yeah, the feedback. I have objective 2, a new action 4. And I have written, add transparency in public comment and the response process, provide a feedback loop, summarize, it just seems wordy, but provide a feedback loop summarizing what was heard and how it was addressed.
And I don't think it was part of this, it wasn't part of the segment, it was overall, right?
No,
This was overall?
This was part of, oh, I see, yes, you're right. Janet, you were speaking specifically regarding the strategy?
So
Yep.
this isn't an action item for the strategy, it's the total strategy recommendation.
So this is a recommendation generally, not in the strategy.
An umbrella.
Not as a piece of the strategy,
Right.
but for the strategy. Yeah.
Okay.
the challenge here is we're really doing workshop business as we move along this afternoon, and we haven't had this many recommendations in a very long time. So are we, any other points of discussion for public outreach? Okay. Before we move on to kind of a quick review and go into what we talked about yesterday, I'd ask BLM if there's anything that we might have missed that you needed additional, that you thought you needed additional discussion on from the board relating to the strategy. Something that we might have skipped, something that you, I realize you can't tell us what to recommend, but you can at least let us know if you need further discussion, or you'd like to see further discussion on some of these points.
I think we followed what your recommendations are probably going to be, and they make sense.
Okay.
We can't think of any other.
Okay. And, okay, so, Anna.
Yes.
Do we want to, we can do one of two things, I guess. We can review the recommendations we just went through that dealt with the strategy, or maybe we should change pace here and go back to, we have some things that came out of yesterday.
Yesterday's actions?
Yeah. Why don't we take a little bit break up from this?
Sure.
And then start on other, if we have any other recommendations.
So I have them written here, not up there. I guess what I'll do is read out what I heard from, I have, I think, 11 items that I heard either yesterday or during today that were actions or recommendations. And I'll just go down the list, reading each one and seeing if you can edit me and decide if you want to make that an action item or not, or recommendation. So first one up was BLM commits to provide email updates to the advisory board on the Mustang Heritage Foundation proposal.
Yes, we did talk about that. Maybe that's the part, and let's skip to the, a little bit to the bottom of your list, because weren't we going to make a general recommendation to fully fund the Mustang Heritage Foundation?
Yeah, that's item number 8. Fully fund the Heritage Foundation. You want me to?
Okay, let's mark this first one as an action item, not a recommendation. And then your number 8 as a recommendation.
I'm going to do it on 2 pages.
And the first action item is just keeping the board apprised of
the progress on that proposal, I thought it was. Dean, you were going to forward it to them or provide periodic updates?
which proposal?
On the team about adoptions and consider. I think the updates was about the deliberations of the team, or the results of the team on evaluating our adoption program and considering private partnerships.
Okay.
I believe that's the essence of it.
Thank you for that clarification, Alice.
Okay. Next up was BLM was going to let the advisory board, an action item, let the advisory board know if the shrub, grass, forest projects will be included in the 2011 budget.
And that's a follow-up.
That's an action.
Yeah, an action item. That's that small sliver of pie that, this is the first time we'd seen it.
It was in the 2010 budget, not in the 2011.
But
Yeah.
Next up, Dean will email the budget slides and gather slides to the advisory board. Or post them on the web if they're existing. So that's a third action item. Next, BLM will compile gathers reports on the number gathered, mortality, and injuries into an annual report.
that might be a recommendation. I mean, I don't know. They do keep that statistical information, but from my understanding of the discussion was, It doesn't really get put into an annual report.
Wasn't that a request by, or a recommendation by the GAO?
Yeah,
Here.
I thought so.
I think so.
So
Does,
make it a
let me understand
recommendation?
correctly, BLM keeps the statistical information from gather to gather to gather and facilities and what have you, but there is no, is there an annual report at the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, with regard to injuries, fatalities?
No, has not been compiled into an annual report.
Then we might,
Was that part of the GAO recommendation specifically?
As I recall, the GAO report recommended that we have more transparency about mortality on gathers, I think is the,
well, in the spirit of that, then it makes sense that maybe the board should make a recommendation that the BLM provide an annual report, I guess for fiscal year, annual report for animal injuries.
I have report on gathers, mortality, and injuries.
No, I think we're focused in on injuries and mortalities that perhaps happen at gathers or at holding facilities. They already do an annual report on gathers.
Sorry.
So it's about the animal care portion of it.
Report on injuries and mortalities from the gathers.
But it's not limited to gathers.
Okay.
Could be
Injuries and
during transport.
mortalities?
Pardon me?
Injuries and mortalities?
How about if we say in all phases of, BLM handling of the animals?
I tend to be specific and say gathers, transportation,
Okay.
facilities.
So associated with gathers?
Mortality, morbidity.
Associated with gathers, transport, short and long-term holding. And short and long-term holding and adoptions, because that goes through the whole spiel.
Okay. BLM compile a fiscal year annual report on injuries and mortalities associated with gathers, transport, short and long-term holding, and adoption.
Yes. Thank you.
Next one, I think, is an action item. BLM was going to put back in the AML's estimated post-gather numbers back into the proposed gather schedule.
Yes. Right. Add back in the column for AMLs, and so we had something to look at. And that was on the gather schedule.
Yes. 6, I have BLM will provide information on cost of adoption per head by different programs, inmate program, Mustang Heritage Foundation, etc. Compile in a summary.
I think that came from Janet. Action item for the comparison.
Okay. 7, I have review past advisory board recommendations. Are they still pertinent, and are they being accomplished?
I think the
is that a recommendation?
I think that was in terms of NAS should as part of its, no?
Repeat
Who
what
are
you had down?
I think you had said it, so if I got it wrong, I apologize. Review past advisory board recommendations. Are they still pertinent, and are they being accomplished? Are they being implemented?
The 2008 recommendations you asked about.
Who wasn't?
It's getting long in the afternoon, so we're trying to.
I thought that discussion came up in the strategy itself.
That's exactly what you're all talking about, the same thing. Reviewing past board recommendations to see if they've been implemented or whether or not they're still pertinent if they have not been implemented.
Along with that, I would like to see someplace addressed that there's some recognition of the past 2 reports, both the GAO report and the When I
OIG.
OIG report. And perhaps the EIEIO report.
Well, let's make sure we get the first one squared away. Who are we asking to do that? We're asking BLM, we're recommending BLM review all advisory board recommendations as to their
Are they still?
Robin,
Still relevant.
relevancy.
Robin, that is an action item in the strategy.
Yes,
Right.
it is.
I thought you were talking only
Okay.
about recommendations concerning research, not every single recommendation, but I'll let you guys decide.
And I thought you were talking about the 2008 recommendations for affecting long-term holding costs.
Okay,
That lists
Well,
the
I didn't
17
know what the
items.
hell we were talking
do we think we were talking about this under science and research as a, under one of the segments of the strategy? Did this come up when we were talking about National Academy of Sciences and science and research? And Vern, you said, where is it in the strategy?
It is under science and research, objective 2, action 2.
Okay, yes.
And it specifically says research recommendations.
Okay.
So maybe that's what you meant and can go away?
I think that's the discussion
Okay.
I was having.
Sorry. Never mind. Okay. Is this a recommendation on the board liaison for each segment of the strategy?
I thought I heard from Carla that it might be helpful to have a board liaison for each of the segments. I'm not sure how we would phrase that.
Well, what I said was, you can have as many liaisons to any of the segments as you want to have. So I would presume you'd want to have somebody that wants to be engaged in those topics.
What if we did a generic recommendation that we recommend the secretaries to include members of the National Advisory Board as liaisons to the strategy? Something just simple like that, and then there's the intent, shows the intent.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not specific, although I started that conversation with Vern as Wild Horse and Burro Research under the science and research thing. But if we keep it general like that, it could be, any one of us or all of us in certain components, like Janet for public outreach and communication, something like that.
Okay, so I have you recommend the secretary consider including members of the National Advisory Board as liaisons to the strategy.
Now, is that repetitive of our liaison? We already have a liaison, myself, Boyd, and Janet were the board liaisons to the strategy development.
So you're
Are we
talking
being
now strategy
repetitive?
implementation?
To the strategy implementation.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good, I have some repeats, that's good. So I think the last one. Recommend that the secretary review public comment and, that this whole strategy process, review the public comment prior to finalizing the strategy and taking it to Congress.
Recommend secretary review all public comment prior to finalizing strategy for Congress.
Did I miss anything? That's all I have.
I'd ask each of you, those of you taking notes, to go through. I'm going to go through my
An observation, that is, we used to get a pipeline report. We had no pipeline report.
I'm sorry. Dean, can you speak to that? We didn't have one this time. I'm sorry it came up.
Sorry, Dean.
I spoke to Robin about not continuing to do the pipeline report. It's kind of, it is hugely labor intensive to develop, and we cover essentially the components of that in our program updates insofar as reporting on adoptions and gathers. I could probably talk 5 minutes about what has to go into that, but it is a very labor intensive thing, and it's, well, I'll stop there.
It's curious.
Yeah, I sometimes think we cause a lot of extra work.
Yes,
Right.
we do.
Well, I think it, originally came out, we started doing that back, it was a meeting in Salt Lake City that Bud started it. And it was just a way to kind of see it on one piece of paper, a glance of tracking how many adoptions, how, where horses were going, et cetera, et cetera. But because in this day of age, things are so tentative, it is, and plus it is a lot of work. So we appreciated B doing that work.
Thank you. I'll pass that on.
In going through my notes, I don't know whether this is a possible recommendation, but I wanted to bring it up again for discussion. When Dr. Kane was going through the research, and we were talking about, there's going to be some research that involves, because of the protocol, it may result in some foals. And I guess my thinking was that since you already know that there may be foals, the research will result in some foals. Is there some way that BLM can identify those potential adopters ahead of time, or a pool of adopters ahead of time? Because we're already faced with an issue with trying to find good adoptive homes for those in the adoption program. And because we're doing research, and there are times when we're going to be producing foals, and they're going to be captives, so we need to find adoptive homes for them. Is there any way that BLM could, put together maybe a separate program, or that you're going to have babies on the ground? Not very many, but you will have some.
You're suggesting a special program to adopt foals that are born out of the research project?
Well, either that, or to make sure that the protocol acknowledges that one of the end results of the research project is going to be excess animals. Because I don't think that's actually recognized in the actual research.
Excess animals in captivity?
Yeah.
Well,
Because in the event it doesn't work, or they use, Dr. Kane, you were talking about, there are going to be some, I don't know the scientific.
Controls.
The control studies, you're right. So we already know that there are going to be some babies on the ground.
And there's lots of babies on the ground from mares that we bring in that are pregnant, so I'm not sure I understand the difference. We do have foals in facilities.
Well, wouldn't it be
already.
nice to have I guess I was thinking, you're doing the research, that you're going to have a minimum of X number of foals, and hopefully you'll know a maximum, and that you anticipate that, so those foals aren't put into the whole foal population that you're trying to deal with. And that becomes maybe it becomes part of the responsibility of the research.
So
That they also have to take care of, finding adoptive homes for the babies.
Would a specific internet adoption, like to adopt them out as weanlings, once they're weaned?
Right.
Because the success rate with being able to tame something like that is going to be much higher.
When we had the EIA problem, like the EIA problem in Utah, when we had that problem in Utah, and the foals were brought back, they were brought back to, I think, Arkansas or Missouri, and there was, Dean, do you remember that? Okay, and there was a pocket of foals. There were 13 foals that were kept in isolation. Those 13 foals were not that they were treated special, because they weren't even in a BLM facility. But there was a concerted effort to find adoptive homes for those 13. I guess that's what I'm thinking about in terms of research projects that we already know is going to result.
Why wouldn't the Bureau handle those folds the same as any other folds that they wind up with?
Yes, you would. You would. But since you already know they're actually going to be there, why not? Why not make it the responsibility of the part of the research protocol to at least entertain the idea of finding good homes for the offspring that research is producing? It takes a little bit of the onus off of BLM. You still have to go through the BLM, it still has to be a BLM adoption. But again, I was trying to draw a parallel, which may not be a good one, off of the EIA foals eons back.
Well, I think it's a hook that we could call attention to these foals, and Carla whispered the word targeted marketing, so I'm not sure we want to put the onus on the researchers to find homes for the horses, but I understand the concept, and if the board wants to recommend or suggest that.
And I don't know whether
Does it need a recommendation, I guess would be my question. Do we need to recommend to have that happen, which we all would agree with?
Right.
Do we need a recommendation to have
I guess
that?
I'm just concerned that, when people come with research projects to BLM, and part of the evaluation is, I think that needs to be. Backs? Well, yeah,
I'm not sure researchers are set up to do that. I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here.
Okay.
How about this? Note to Sally. Note to Sally, targeted marketing.
I can live with that. It's going to come back with us. So.
An action item for Sally to consider?
Right. Target marketing for excess animals produced through research projects. Okay. I know one of the things, we had a commenter talk about this, but I know I had been approached on a number of occasions, and we don't have the ability to make a decision, but the whole Coyote Canyon issue, which actually would have maybe fallen into special designated herds, which really isn't part of the strategy. I know that, and there may be others, to at least get maybe some information at an upcoming board meeting to entertain the concept of whether or not BLM can restore or redesignate wild horse areas. But we don't have enough information on that to act now. It was more of an action item in terms of if we can get some information, further information.
I think we reported to the board on that several years ago. My recollection is the Coyote Canyon area lands that used to be public are no longer public. Can't recall if they were transferred to the state or what, but there's no BLM ownership there, and I think the public comment was that we should restore the herd, and we don't own the lands. We have no authority there. I can second check, and we can bring information back to the board to verify that what I've said is accurate.
Or I can check with BLM. That's fine. I know that's been a recurring thing.
So is it an action item? I'm sorry.
No, I don't.
I'll check into it.
I don't think we need to get into that minutia.
Well, it's one of those deals that keeps coming back, and we don't respond specifically during a comment period to people, and so it keeps coming back because there's no information fed back to maybe explain what the reasoning is, what actually happened, what the facts were. So I'm not sure how to deal with that. I'm just, maybe just bringing it back to the board as an action item to just readdress the reasons why that happened might be a good thing to disseminate the information.
Maybe it's an action item to confirm that BLM has no authority to restore or redesignate areas, wild horse areas, that have now moved into other agency hands, something to that effect.
It's not within
the
BLM
scope of
ownership.
BLM, right.
It-
Let me just confirm that BLM has no authority to redesignate, what was the end of that?
Or redefine, or redesignate or restore.
Or restore, what, private lands?
No, the Coyote Canyon herd, or did you want me to get more
It doesn't
broad?
even have to, I mean, it doesn't have to be specific, if it's true for,
Correct, but what I'm saying is
Yeah.
with that specific item keeps reoccurring, I think
Right.
that what your concern was.
Yes.
It would be nice to maybe just
reiterate or
reiterate that,
reconfirm.
what
Okay.
happened there, so that it does alleviate the concerns by the public.
And then another inquiry more, it's not a recommendation, but it's more of an inquiry, with regard to, and this was specific to Wyoming with the consent decree, how is that going to work? Should BLM not get the monies needed to do any summer gathers? If indeed, I don't have the gather plan in front of me, whether that might adversely impact, for example, the state of Wyoming. And that's more of a legal question. Because that was brought up, and it was brought up by the board and also by a commenter.
Thank you. Robin,
Yes.
this issue of forage allocation between livestock and horses is a reoccurring theme. And on one hand, I'm very reluctant to ask the Bureau to do more things. But I wonder, I know there's already existing reports on this. Maybe we ought to prepare a little report, or ask them to prepare a report in terms of AUMs dedicated to different resource users. There's obvious misunderstanding of what the definition of an AUM is. We saw that plainly today.
The last forage allocation report I remember seeing came right after the Al Pearson report in the it was like 96, or, no, not 96. Oh, shoot. Dean, do you remember the Al Pearson report? It's that same, it came out the same time, and it was a forage allocation report.
See, I'm thinking a little more than that.
Oh, more,
What's been
okay.
the change in AUM allocations over the last 50 years for livestock, for example? It's half what it used to be. I keep hearing comments that, oh, you bring in livestock behind horse removals, and that's not happening. Maybe we need to clear the air a little on this whole issue. What is an AUM? How's forage allocated? What's the history of allocation?
So maybe for a future advisory board meeting, BLM could do a presentation on those things?
Yeah.
Forage allocations, changes over the past many years.
Forage allocation between livestock, horses, and big game. Plot that over time. Define what an AUM is. That was a very-
Define an AUM.
And how allocations are.
And define how allocations are made.
Like I say, I'm reluctant, Dean, to say, do more reports to the board. But this issue comes up every damn time.
BLI does not have
And it's full of gross misinformation.
Like you say, it's a big job, but actually we've already started on it. We have a draft and recognize the importance to try to explain this to the public to clear the air.
Thank you for being ahead of the curve, Dean.
I had another possible recommendation. I think DOI currently does not have a scientific integrity plan, but they're working on one, and I understand that maybe a recommendation from the board to move in that direction might be helpful. So a recommendation for the secretary to adopt a scientific integrity plan.
We were just chatting and thinking that recently something just came out from the department on scientific integrity.
It's BLM that we haven't finished.
It's BLM that we haven't finished. Okay.
Thank you.
I had BLM was going to provide how they were responding to the recommendations of AHPA.
Yes, yes, and well, and I guess that would also include when the AEP report comes out. So maybe, well, we could be specific.
Those are also within the strategy.
Right.
Do we need to make it a recommendation or an action item?
Well, historically, when BLM makes responses, they make it public. It's on the website. So that sort of covers it. And the same will be true for, I would imagine, for AEP and any other type of thing. So I don't think we need an action item per se on that.
Rob,
yes.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. In regards to some of the public comment this morning, there were a couple of people representing organizations that made offers to work with the BLM. Is there a vehicle in place to respond to those offers officially? One specifically was for independent observers from the ASPCA. There was also Neil Robinson's Wild Horse Official Aid about the watering program. Is there anything in place, or is there a vehicle? What will happen as far as responding to those offers? And there was also a gentleman who reiterated a request about scheduling meetings in areas affected by HMAs, so that people that are more affected by it, that don't have the ability to travel, could participate. So he said that he's made this request before and never heard anything. And I guess my question would be, is there something in place, or can something be put into place to address these offers so that there's a response? Because I think that, it'd be appropriate to respond to these offers.
The third point, with regard to where we hold our meetings. When I first started, we really tried to move around the country, and granted, there isn't a wild horse impact in Virginia or Missouri or what have you, but we tried to, the concept was to move them around the country in order to ensure the public, we had all the public from different geographical areas of the states could attend meetings. That was one thing. I think the point that was made most recently was to go to areas in which there is wild horse activity and there are impact. We have, over the last maybe almost 3 years, the venue for the meetings has been determined in large part because of the budget restrictions. And BLM does the arithmetic in terms of flying their people in, and Ramona, does the hotel rates and meeting rooms and what have you. So a large part of that has ended up being because of budget restrictions. Now, before we adjourn today, we usually set the meetings, and actually, since this is the first meeting of the year, I'm a big proponent of setting the meetings for the rest of this year. So we might have an opportunity to kind of move around. So I just wanted to give a little history on the third comment that you made on that. So we have budget restrictions. We're trying to get to all different parts of the country so people have an option to actually come. We've never been to like Boston or Wisconsin. Or Oregon. Well, we've been to Oregon.
We've been to Oregon. Been to California. We've been to Nevada. Been to Wyoming.
Right.
No, I've been on the board.
We've met in Cheyenne. I don't know whether, you
I
probably
wasn't on
weren't
the
on the board then.
Well, and Wyoming's a good example, because Wyoming is, you know, flying into Rock Springs is a little bit of a challenge.
Yes,
So,
but Rock Springs offers a wide
Right.
variety of the components of this program, because they've got, it's within driving distance of the prison program in
right,
Rollins.
exactly.
Rock Springs, Wyoming offers a lot of opportunity of components related to the program, because it's within driving distance of the prison program in Rollins. It's within a variety, or surrounded by a variety of herd management areas. There is a wild horse scenic driving tour that kind of loops around the same neighborhood, and it has a short-term holding facility. And it is an excellent opportunity to talk to or receive comment from the people who are impacted by horses on a daily basis, including, you know, a variety of resource users and resource planners. So we constantly miss that kind of an interface.
Okay, so let's keep that discussion in mind when we get to the very end of the meeting, and deal with potential meetings. But I wanted to make sure what the first two things had to do.
The first two things were just, you know,
with volunteers.
ASPCA and the Wild Horse Official Aid Organization.
And for those individuals who wish to volunteer, they contact NPO, correct? Or
If they want to volunteer in Washington, they
Yeah,
they
no,
could
for
contact
National
the
Program Office.
They
things.
probably ought to volunteer with the local office that would supervise them, because I'm not going to tell
For water
anybody.
development programs
Right.
of the like, that would be appropriate. I'm thinking in terms of the other suggestions of more global proposals, whether it's observers. There was one about, you know,
Providing water.
proposals about the volunteers with the triplicates, you know, to make sure that if people do, when the public does go to a facility, that they can write down what they're seeing. I mean, those are more they're more programmatic.
And you know what I think that we missed? I know one of the segments of the strategy dealt with volunteerism and improving volunteerism, but I don't think we really maybe looked at that action item, because I think we're trying at the national office with Bob Abbey's very specific attention to increase the ability of people to volunteer. And so maybe you make a recommendation that we do a very good job of responding to people who have applied for volunteer opportunities with a, yes, here's where we want you to do it. No, we can't do it at this time, and this is the reason why. Or it's potentially we could do it in the future. We'll get back to you by this date. Because I think that's what you're saying is we have some proposals and people don't know where they stand. And I think it's valid to get back to folks, and I think we should do that.
I was mostly just concerned with that you've got some, what seem to be some very sincere efforts to want to contribute, and part of this strategy wants to embrace that. And so I guess my question is, you've got these folks that are out there offering help, you got the BLM saying we'd like to help, and I'm just wondering what vehicle is there as a channel that those people can communicate and open up a line of communication with the BLM so that they can participate.
So I think I heard two things. One is the board, that you may want to have a recommendation that you ask BLM to specifically respond to the volunteer proposals. And then secondly, I think you're asking, is there a point of contact? Where do these folks go?
It may be something on the website that people want to, if they've got a volunteer proposal or a volunteer action that they would like to initiate, that there would be some place that they could make this offer, and that there would be a response. And whether the response is yes or no, at least they get a response.
So consider having a specific volunteer place on the website. Volunteer
well, I'm just
exchange.
throwing that out there that's as a possibility. I don't have all the answers. I think what I just see people wanting to get involved and help, and I think that it's a benefit to the BLM in the horse program to have help, especially with budget issues. As long as it doesn't cost more to oversee what they're doing than it costs to get the job done.
And Anna, maybe you don't limit it to the website. Maybe you just say, you know, provides a mechanism by which,
consider specific mechanism.
Right.
Yeah.
For
Whatever.
contact.
Yeah, and this is similar to the question that I asked BLM earlier. What happened to the 100 people or so that volunteered when we had the board, the June board session with the introducing the strategy and people offering, and we had learned, Dean had said that those recommendations or offers went out to the field, and it sounds like there's a request that be centralized, because we don't know what the field offices are doing with those recommendations, so there needs to be a follow-up. So maybe if it's a recommendation that says something like, you know, develop a process for volunteers, offers, and I don't know how else to say this, managing those requests and getting back to those people.
Tracking and responding.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the key things you mentioned that was centralized.
Yeah.
Centralized location where people can submit their proposals, because yeah, if you give them to me and I put them in my pocket because we meet in the burger joint, I may lose them. Is there a centralized place to make sure they're not forgotten?
Yeah.
So develop a process for volunteer offers, tracking and responding.
Yeah, and you know, developmental process that, you know, because it's going to take a little effort probably to get some of this stuff going.
It seems that California we've received reports from them before about their marvelous volunteer system, and perhaps a model exists there that we could build off of.
Again, I see it as kind of two separate things. You have the volunteers who are willing to go out and work on water improvement projects, to go out actually in the field. Then I see I've heard of folks and organizations and entities that are volunteering to do, whether it's a pilot program or it's a suggestion on how to change. It's more of a program change than an actual go out and feed the horses or work on water development.
But they still need a mechanism by which to get BLM's attention so they can find out if there's something
yes, and
they
that
could
I
do.
think by doing a centralized.
It's great if you already have a relationship or can build a relationship with your field office in your local area. That's the best. But if you don't know who to contact, you don't have a relationship, we'll see if we can provide a centralized location for folks to apply. We can track that request, and we can respond.